a galactic purr of KKs,
invites you to Space Cat's Happy Hour.
Let your mind relax. We meet in a dimension outside of time,
Where the playfully curious thrive.
So go on, fill your tin cup chalice with the sacred elixir of creativity. Laugh till you breathe violet flame at the theme's absurdity.
and above all, let out your full-throated song with us.
Here at Space Cat's Happy Hour, with the galactic purr of KKs.
Hello, welcome to Space Cat's Happy Hour, where this episode we are going to share anything that seemed controversial to us in the past and we hadn't shared, but now we're sharing it. And other stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you said that right away up front, because I meant to say this when we were talking off air, but I was just listening to a video about, I don't know, whatever, spiritual shit, whatever. And they were talking about how the throat chakra is the most blocked chakra of the old matrix or something like that. I don't know. And it was their opinion, obviously, blah, blah, blah. But then I needed to hear that because it made me mad that I haven't been speaking as much as, like, I've been making myself so small. And I know that I've been doing that. We all know that it's time to take up space, blah, 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 blah. But it like hit me in just the right way again, like a deeper layer of it, where I was like, why the fuck do I not say the shit that I want to say?
Yes.
Like I don't need to qualify it. I don't need to do I'm just going to fucking speak with authority now. And I'm probably going to go back in and out of like the old programming of like, well, let me just qualify that. I'm going to, it's gonna maybe be a little bit messy, but I'm really glad you said that, because I think it's just like, it helped me shed a little bit more of the layers of like, just say your shit, man. I don't care anymore. At least that's my vibe right now.
Yes.
It feels good. So
Yes. Also, that makes me think of two things. One is it's also another interesting way that I think you and I are different, because I think you are meant to speak more exactly how you just described without qualifications.
Oh.
And I think because I'm a straddler, like I was always feeling bad about how many qualifications I would get, but I think they're important because it's like, I have to acknowledge that other part of me, like it's supposed to be acknowledged. The other part of me that's like, well, but also this. Whereas I think you're supposed to be more like this. This is like this, and this is unqualified right now. And like I think it's like very important. And it reminds me of a talk that I overheard two spiritual people on a podcast having once, where one of the people was saying how important it was for them at one point to hear the other person speaking very unilaterally, like authoritatively, like no, like, and it just cut through to their psyche and allowed them a certain freedom.
I like that.
And I think, yeah, and sometimes I think I do communicate that way, but a lot of times I think my qualifications are like important for the way that I communicate. So that's cool. I always like the ways that we are different. It just soothes me. It soothes me that that's allowed. You know what I mean? And it's like, of course it's allowed because everything's allowed, but it's like very soothing. It's like, no, it's not just one way. You have to do things that's the right way.
This is fun. I'm glad we get to demonstrate the differences in us too. People obviously are all kinds of things, but like at least we're getting two examples of way of operating. And I'm actually glad that you said that to me, because it helps me. I probably would have waffled a little bit more, and hearing you say it out loud just mirrors my own conviction that I probably would have started second guessing if I hadn't heard you say it.
Well, it's how you're thing too, which I think is also came up in human design. You say I know or I don't know, and I say I think all the time, and it's like, so you I think you are supposed to have that like I know energy, and I'm in the like, well, I think this and I also think this energy sometimes. And anyway, it's fun. And the other thing about the throat chakra that really resonated was I've felt this when working on myself energetically and certain other people and I just didn't have the energy to get to it until now. It's like your like laundry list of like things that you're working through. But a lot of times if I felt my energy going up through my central channel of my body, it would hit under the throat and it would just kind of like stick. And so, yeah, it has definitely felt like that chakra is like the one that just almost the one that's like, I don't know if it's the last, but one of the last to like that you work on, because you got to work on the root first to like be able to get to the point to work on the throat. Like you have to feel safe enough to actually put it into that throat part or whatever. And it reminds me also of a period where I was doing a lot of somebody turned, I can't remember who, but some spiritual person turned me on to this Atlantean collar. And then I kept seeing it in certain people when I would work on it and myself, where it was like a purposeful restriction that we put around our throat chakras and stuff. And then it was like taking those off, but like, you kind of got to take it off again and again, or like peel away the layers of it. Like
peel the layers. Also, before I forget, it's December 17th, in case anybody cares. That's when we're recording.
And usually I'm very grateful to be recording this podcast today because 17 is a big number for me, but usually, and especially in 2022, I guess I wasn't even paying attention to it before that, but I definitely noticed in 22 that the 17th of each month would typically be a very challenging day for me. Often a day where I was like, felt very, like triggered. And I don't feel that today. I feel like I already cleared it earlier in this month, and like today I woke up feeling a bit yucky, but it like turned around in the middle of the day. And anyway, I'm just really grateful that it's like, it was a day where I was able to record a podcast.
17 has never been a number for me until this year. And now it's like, it's 17 and 47 and 30, but those are my numbers. It's just, they follow me everywhere, especially that 17 now. And it's very interesting. I don't know what channel that is, but I don't know why I said channel. Energy.
Oh, interesting. I like that channel, the 17 channel. Just came through. It's like a distortion. It's like you got to move through like a distortion frequency and then get through to something else. Like you got to swim through it or whatever.
Oh, I'm going to let that percolate. That seems like a thing that I am going to get more insight about like later. Because I totally feel the importance of that, but I can't actually describe why yet. It's got to percolate in the Pisces soup.
Yeah. And I don't know. It just like came through that. So that's interesting. Okay. But I want to jump out at the top of the show with one of the so-called controversial, I don't actually think they're very controversial, ideas about reality that I find funny, which was, I was talking to you about yesterday, which was, it came to me after like a very long period of going for walks with my partner, Mike, and him saying like, where are they all sleeping? These raccoons and these animals, like, where are they sleeping? I was like, yeah, like if you see occasionally I see a raccoon sleeping and it's very visible and they take up a lot of space in the tree. There's like so many animals that supposedly sleep in trees or other places like shrubs, and you never see them. And it's because they're just blipping out into other dimensions. It's like, and it reminded me after I was talking to you, I was like, oh yeah, it's like that guy that was on the Gaia network, like there was, or that person I should say, that was talking about reality in this way and was like, well, there's really nothing outside of what, like they were talking to an interviewer and they're like, there's nothing outside of like this conversation right now, like everything we can tangibly see and feel, but everything beyond that like is like completely fluid. And it kind of goes back to that as well. But I feel like I can't remember their name. It would be better if I could. It's like, if I ever had a reference to anything concrete. But it's like all of like material reality. It's too much to actually for us to hold onto. So we create these ideas of what's going on, which is like, yes, and so there's all these animals out there, and then when it's time for them to go to sleep, they like, or like burrow down, they like go into a crevice in the tree, and then you like look at how many trees that have holes in them and how many, and you're like, it doesn't add up. There's not enough room. And it's like, no, they're actually just not physically spending all of their time in like tangible material existence.
I wasn't I wasn't sure I'd be able to even participate in the conversation because like I get it, but I didn't think I'd have anything to add. But as you were talking, it made me think about how all of the actual scientific, quote unquote, actual, whatever, like people who aren't spiritual or whatever, if they only like science, there are scientific studies about how we are not seeing reality. Our brains trick us into like
Yes.
only a certain kind of stuff. And so this is very possible from a scientific point of view. That's interesting.
Because it's like, anyway, it came up for me again because we were having this crazy weather. It was like sleet and hail and rain and all. And I was like, I don't actually think that the raccoons, I don't know why it's raccoons so much. Like, I'm like, I don't feel like they're out there like suffering through this in some crook of a tree or some tree hollow, this like horrible weather. I feel like they're just not actually there. And then they're just like, I take a walk and then I interact with a version of reality where they show up. And it's not that I don't think the raccoons are doing their own thing on their own. Like they're also an expression of consciousness doing its own thing, but I just don't think they spend as much time on the earth grid as we are taught that they do. They just kind of blip in and out. And I've heard people talk about that specifically for cats. The cats are constantly blipping in and out, and that's why they spend so much time sleeping, is to allow them to go into astral realms and stuff. But it just feels true for everything to me. Like everything is just constantly blipping in and out and it just also makes sense. Like when the animal communicator, Sonia Kane, she was on Karen Rontowski's podcast and she was talking about the forest fires and how the animal spirits would just leave. Like they wouldn't go through that horrific thing that you wouldn't want them to go through, that like horribly upsets people to think about. But they would just like leave, like their spirits would just part ahead of time and their bodies would just whatever. And I was like, yeah, everything's just blipping in and out all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think this makes a whole lot of freaking sense. I'm glad you're saying it out loud for me to process.
It's like, yeah, it's just like, because it's too much to, like, we're experiencing this. So this was the other thing that I had because, okay, so I have this person that I was following on social media who talked a lot about, it was kind of a version of like, imagination creates and perceives reality, and like you are the creator of your reality and your everything. But their version of it was self-concept, and like in their version, nobody else had free will because it's just you're interacting with a projection of something that's you. And I was finding a part of that triggering, and then I realized I was like, those because you can choose to live that thing where you really are the only God in your reality, and everything else is just like a kind of like a watered down mirror coming back to you, and nothing is as real as you. But I feel like I've lived that experience and it wasn't very satisfying. It was kind of awful. And for some people, maybe it's not, and it's just fun and magical, and that's totally cool. But for me, it was like, ugh! And so I was like, well, what? For me, it feels very important for other people to also be just as much their God selves as I am. And so again, it goes back to this version where like everything is constantly morphing around you, which is how I have been experiencing reality since the beginning of my waking. Everything's constantly morphing and mirroring back. So it was kind of triggering those fears of like, am I the only thing here? Like, like I will walk down the street and people will just be talking aloud the thoughts that I'm having in my head, or like responding to them. And it just, you start to feel like very alone, And then the epiphany that I had again yesterday was that, because it felt so important for me to hold on to the fact that it's like, no, the God part is in everything, which is how I see it too. I see it as like, I often see it as water. It's like a huge ocean of God consciousness, and it just flows into our little creeks and rivulets. That's us. And like, each one is like an individual expression of that, but it's all the same soup.
Really beautiful.
And I was like, okay, but it is super intense how much reality is a mirror. So it was like, yes, it's not that they don't have their own free will. It's that I am the pilot of what reality I'm navigating. So they can't control which version of them shows up in my reality. There's infinite versions of all of us. only I can control that because I'm the pilot, and it's mirroring back the experience that I am putting my attention on and having at that time or needing to have, and just like vice versa for them. So anyway, that felt better to me. I don't know if I explained that at all coherently, but it felt better to me and like more peaceful and more more accurate for my experience than that other version that feels very isolating and like quite hellish, actually, if I'm being honest. It feels like hell. It feels like I've been there and it's been hell. It's like, no, that's not fun. It's not fun to think that you're the only God and nobody else is God.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it actually did make a whole lot of sense as you were talking. If there was, because I know you've said before that lifetime where you were the only God or whatever, was your djinn life, I think?
Yes. Just saying, yeah, like a djinn or a genie.
Okay. Well, I was wondering if like that aspect of you incarnated for some sort of karmic healing of that lifetime. I don't know. Have you already thought of that? And I'm just saying something completely.
No, please go on. You are.
I don't know. Like maybe I know that we've talked about your genie and self or whatever before, but not a whole lot. So I'm not sure I'm going to remember everything. But like I know that it showed up, or he showed up. I think it was he showed up in one of our sessions, and he was just very tired and like sad and just wanted to die or something like that. Like he just wanted to. So I feel like, and we did some healing around that. I don't remember the exact details, but I know that we like went to the underworld and, did some stuff there. But like, I'm wondering if there's whatever you did in that lifetime, or maybe you fell into that despair and couldn't get out and you wanted to die. Maybe you did die. I don't know, or went into some sort of genie death that can only be explained by genies. And it's not known in human terms how genies die. I don't really know, but like supposed to go through this lifetime figuring out that navigating that, exactly what you just said, like I am the pilot, but everybody has a God self. Like, what if you were supposed to figure that out and continue living and enjoying life instead of what he did? I don't know. I'm throwing out. It might be.
Well, that is so helpful and interesting, because I feel like when I woke up in 2019-20, it was like there were certain aspects that were so fast and so big, and I couldn't handle them. And it hit that exact wall of like, literally, you can make anything happen. And then it's like, well, what's the fun of existence? That like, it's like, I felt like that genie. It's like, you can grant any wish. So what's the point? It just feels boring and dull, Even yesterday, right after, like I left you an audio note when I was like talking about having that epiphany about being in the driver's seat as opposed to nobody else having free will. And then like it immediately sent me into like a mini version of that void that I would go into, where it's like, okay, well, why am I still playing this game? Because I've like cracked the code. It's like, there's nothing new or interesting. So I do feel like I'm still like, this is the lifetime where I'm cracking the code, where it's like, oh no, it's still interesting. And you do play a different game from that point on. And it's really letting go of the old game and like accepting that. And there's like some stuff around letting go of the old game for good that I feel like I've been fighting. Which is what the one thing I wanted to say was, every time I would be like, no, I have to honor the God part of everybody else because that feels better to me, I would immediately turn into a scenario where that person had to have some power over me or be like angry at me for some reason, or like that was their form of showing their God self, was like they were mad at me, and then it was like a really shitty experience where they were like telling me how shitty I was or whatever. Like that's how I would like remind myself that other people were also gods, was through unpleasant experience. Except for, I would say, with the exception of you specifically, our relationship, and also our friend Pearl as well, where it was like, they're like, no, hi, don't worry. Like, I know I'm a god, but like, I'm also not mad at you all the time and like resentful of you.
Really interesting lifetime for you then, well, for all of us, but like in particular this aspect, because we're on the cusp of this new chapter where we're literally doing something completely different. We're creating for creation's sake, just having fun, living in joy. I know we still have, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but my point is it's not going to be these same old tired lessons over and over and fucking over again. It's going to be new shit that we're dealing with. So this is a chance for your genie self to be like, yes, we've closed that karmic loop. You're still alive. You're still like, navigating this as best you can. And once we get into this new chapter, which is coming next year, or at least the start of it, obviously, it's like, that's how you heal, is by creating and having fun and like whatever else the genie decided to give up on doing, because the game was old and tired at that point. So I feel like you're doing really good work in all of this, obviously, with like so much of this, so many of the other working on too. But I feel like you're just like, you've not only have you broken the cycle, but we're not quite in that new chapter yet. So it feels like you haven't, but you absolutely have. You just have to give yourself credit for it.
Thank you. Oh no, everything you're saying is such a bomb. It's just like, it really is trusting that the new game is going to be fun and interesting.
Yes.
And it's like this tricky place. I will say for me, like, I think a lot of people think that the hard part of this is, okay, the words are not coming to me for the hard part that other people I think of, but the actual hard part is accepting how powerful you are. It's like, I think some people think it's like the opposite of that. And like,
I feel that
the hard part is like the suffering and the oppression and the violence that we do with each other and all of that stuff. And it's like, for me, the actual hard part is behind that. It's like knowing that is just a game that we're playing, and actually accepting that there's a different game. And what that always feels like to me is like I get end of the game feeling, but it goes like end of all the games. It's like, that's where I go like projecting right to the end of every game. Cause I'm like, well, if I know this, if I know that I'm just this like God figure navigating whatever, like what experience would ever be interesting after that? Like, like what would ever hold my attention? And I think a lot of us are really suppressing that deep subconscious knowing of that thing, of that wound, which is a wound. I have to keep reminding myself that that's a wound and that's an illusion and it's not the truth. And we hide it under like, no, the actual hard thing is how hard life is, and how painful it is to exist in my body, and how painful it is to exist under some oppression, how hard it is to climb out from that. And it's like, no. That's not the hard thing. The hard thing is the part behind that. And it's actually very joyful, but it seems so unjoyful. That's like the big scary boogeyman at the end of a haunted house in the part that we put is like, it's going to be awful. And it's like, part of me keeps saying, it's like, no, you're just going to be happier. You're literally just going to be, instead of like having a tiny dribble of happiness that's offset constantly by misery or worry or dread or discomfort, or happiness and curiosity and energy, which you see in those people that haven't incarnated 8 billion times as a human on Earth.
There you go. Okay, I got you back. Okay, so I heard it's what you see in people who haven't incarnated 800 times, and then I lost.
Yes, as like a human or something in an equal paradigm, where you have those people with what I call freshly baked new energy, where they're not scared of everything, and they just have that deep sense of like, yes, I am connected to everything in unity, but they're also very curious and open, and they enjoy life. They're not miserable. They're like very joyful. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, you have it. It resonated very, very, very much about the real wound being like accepting how powerful we are, not the actual suffering. Because earlier this year, I think it was the summertime, I was just like, I knew I was being small. And so that every time I would try to command reality or, whatever it was, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And I would just be like, what the fuck is actually happening here? Show me how big I actually am. Because every time it wouldn't work when I would try to command reality, I would just immediately go back into being small again. Like, oh, I am not actually that powerful then. I must be too big for my britches, or,
Yes.
And then I was just so pissed off. And one, show me how big I am, because I don't understand what my power is. And I'm getting frustrated with the wound of being too big for my britches and not being in my power. I need to get over this wound, but I can't do that without knowing how big I am. And I can't trust my own self right now because I half the time stuff works and half it doesn't. And I need help basically with getting through whatever this karmic loop is. And then like, I think 2 weeks later, I was reading a channeled message from the Akashic Records. And it was like, you are literally a universe. And I was like, oh, okay. Like even more, you know, you don't even know I forget what the channel message was. It was something like, shit. It was basically what you were saying. It was like, a lot of you are thinking that you are maybe too bombastic. That wasn't the word they used, but it was kind of like too big for your britches kind of energy. It was like, a lot of you think you're too big for your britches when you start to feel into your own power. And that could be further from the truth because you are literally God, a universe, like everything. And I was like, okay. So it calmed me down a little bit because I was like, I think we're in this transition period where the old grid is keeping us from using our power because of all the blocks, and that's fine, whatever. But we're not quite in the new grid yet, but we're anchoring in the new energies of the new grid. So like sometimes our power really does work and sometimes we're still kind of, you know, so I just had to calm down and just be like, okay, I will feel into all of my power at some point, but it helped me sort of, and I still spiral. Like I go back into being like, oh my God, I am absolutely too big for my britches. This is ridiculous. I have been put in my place again and I feel like shit or, you know, whatever. But like, I know that is programming and I can gently work through it and allow it to pass through me. And now I know that like, we're literally coming into the frequency of being able to use our full power, or at least way more of it than we've ever been able to in the past. So resonated hard.
Yes. And my version of that wasn't being worried that I was too big for my britches. It was worried that I wasn't going to allow myself to be, I was like, I experienced some stuff in 2020, like some miracles and stuff that I was like, okay. And it wasn't like, it was so big that it was like, okay, I know it's not that I'm too big for my britches. It's that I'm not going to let myself be this big because it feels so upsetting and triggering. But what was interesting is, to speak to your point, I asked at one point, because I love my numbers and my percentages because they make things that are like way too chaotic. They tend to help me. And I was like, okay, what percentage am I of the things I'm wanting to like create and stuff am I allowing to happen? Because my fear was always that I just wouldn't allow myself and I wouldn't be able to get in this lifetime to a place where I would allow myself. And it was somewhere between like maybe 25 and 45%. Okay. And then I said, what's my ideal? And it was somewhere around 70%, which wasn't 100%, right? Because 100% is, for me at least, maybe not for someone else, maybe for someone else it's a real joyride, but for me, that is boring. Yeah. And what keeps it interesting, I don't know if I froze out there, is like keeping it at that higher level, just keeping it so that it surprises you which ones come to fruition and which ones don't, or like it happens in a surprise, you know, so it's like not every single thing. So that was very interesting to me to hear. It was like, I don't know if I would have expected 100%, but 70% was like, oh, it's still like, you know, that's like high, but not super high. And it was like, yeah, that's your sweet spot. So that was really, that was very illuminating.
That's awesome.
And somebody else's, this is like how much time you should ideally spend in light and density, where it's like every single person I've talked to has had a different answer and a different answer than me. It's been very interesting to hear other people's answers.
I loved that experiment. I was like 60-40, exactly.
Okay. What do you feel is your ideal percentage of things that actually come to fruition that you like into material reality that you want for yourself? Like what's your percentage?
Well, 80% just jumped in my head. So I'll say that.
That's so funny. That's why I was like 80. That's what I thought for you too.
What? Oh You're so quantumly
I immediately heard 80. I was like 80.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is right now. And that makes sense, actually, probably for the same reasons you were talking about, where it's like, if it's 100%, you're just going to feel lonely, but 80% is fun and fresh. And I think I needed more. I probably need more than you, because my
we froze again.
Damn it. I can't tell because your car is so quiet.
This is part of what we're doing right now. If anyone else listening to this, we're going through a cycle right now of like major internet connectivity, and we were just watching something that, or I was just watching something that was trying to explain the interconnect, what it actually means. It's like heart brain. It's like letting go of brain narratives to allow the heart to take over. But anyway, hopefully we'll get back to a place again where you can repeat a little bit of what you said.
Okay, cool. Well, I know where to cut then. Okay, so I was saying that I feel like mine is probably higher than yours because we have sort of opposite wounds on that, where like I need to be more in my power because I have not been in way lots of previous incarnations, and I need more of that stuff to actually happen and find magical, as opposed to you, where it's like I need a little bit less to actually keep the magic alive. So it makes sense that we're different on that too.
It does make sense. Yeah, totally. Oh, I was going to say part of this, like letting go of the old game that's been coming up in a big way. So I did an oracle reading in September that was around the time that the queen died. And it just, there was so much in that about how, and again, this really feels more applicable to souls who have had a lot of human incarnations, but like myself. And I'm very tied to the English Empire. I've had a lot of incarnations relating to the English Empire and to like either preserving it or trying to help it disintegrate. But it's like that enjoyment that we have of the romanticizing that we have of like these old ways of being, because we come here to experience them, that are like very polarized and very high contrast experiences, and they come with all this drama and all of this stuff, you know, all the baggage that accompanies it, but it's like very fun for us. So anyway, I've been watching the Meghan and Harry docuseries on Netflix. It's been hilarious, and I was feeling all this. It was very hard for me to not be judgmental, because I was like, you guys are so clearly some messy bitches who live for drama, and they just won't admit it to themselves. Like they're just like in a never-ending cycle of like loving the drama that comes from being associated with the crown, even while they extricate themselves. And it's like, that's us. That's so many of us right now.
Yep.
Is we're in that place where we're like, we know that we don't want to play this game anymore, and we're like, oh, this is literally killing me. It's become so toxic, you know. Even if it was just a fun thing that we wanted to play out, we incarnated in this version of ourselves that wants to switch to something new, so it feels so toxic and awful. And but we're still like, it sure is fun to like ride those waves. Yeah. So it was all the oracle reading I did that was always about how having compassion for ourselves, for the parts of us that don't want to let go of the old game. And it is interesting now that I know you and Pearl specifically, because Pearl, she has a lot of freshly baked energy, so it's very interesting interacting with her, and like she doesn't have a lot of like human incarnation after incarnation baggage and stuff, and so it's like it's just different, and there's not as much attachment to certain things. And then you as well, I think you hold a lot of the death energy that was like came here intentionally to see things die, so you're like get excited by the deaths. Yeah. And like I just feel it in myself. I feel the tug. I feel like the pull of like the joy of the old things and the old human ways and stuff. Anyway, it's just interesting to see like those, like now that I have you guys in my life to like compare and contrast that to, it's been very interesting.
I was remember as you were talking, I was remembering that one walk I took while I was still living in Montana. I don't know, end of maybe August-ish. I don't know, but it was enough where there was like apples growing on a tree next to the path that I took. And I took an apple because I wanted to see if it tasted good. Like, I don't know. I was like, I don't even know if these are ripe, but like somewhere on the ground. And I was like, well, if they're ripe enough to fall on the ground, I'll see if they're ripe enough to eat or whatever. So I picked an apple, and like, I was just walking along the path, and I took a bite, and it tasted like, okay, Mercury and Pisces here. So let me just, it tasted like honey and sunshine and earth and freedom and just like this beautiful, nostalgic, melt in your mouth happiness. And for some reason, whatever that taste was, it just made me like teary-eyed and nostalgic for like the density I'm leaving behind with all of these fucking lifetimes and all of this density and, you know, everything that like we want to leave behind because we're like, we're done with suffering. Like we're in this new game, like whatever. But I had this huge nostalgia for everything that I had learned. And again, I don't even have like specific examples. It was just like a soup of nostalgia for the soup of existence in these past however many eons of like that density. And I was like, a part of me didn't want to let it go. I was like, wow, it was a very valuable and beautiful experience. Yes, it was suffering, but like you learn a lot from all of that stuff. And I don't want to stay in it really. Like most of me is like ready, absolutely fucking ready, bored to angry tears with all these dumbass old lessons that I'm so done with. But in that moment, I really felt the goodbye of that. And it was surprisingly heartbreaking. Wow. So anyway, I this is all resonating a lot.
Well, you learn a lot, but it's also like, it's very satisfying. Like I was just feeling the other day how satisfying it was if you just living a human life and you go through your trials and tribulations, and then if you have a lifetime where you actually come through and you like are victorious and you like get past them, and you manage to get to your happy place in that life, but you like went through all this stuff, and then you feel like that little individual unit who managed to do it in this big vast space despite the odds and despite everything is a very different feeling than like, yeah, I managed to do that because I'm God and I can do anything. And I, you know, it's like that's a very satisfying feeling of like, I fucking did it, you know? And that is a human life too. Like it's not all like right now I think we're all living lives that are like insufferable, or not all of us, but a majority of us are living lives that are just becoming more and more insufferable so that we can, to help us let go, because it's so, but it's like not every human life is just suffering. There's human lives that are like super gratifying, and you do feel that sense of like, oof, accomplishment against the odds, and you beat the odds, and like that sense of beating the odds and all that stuff is the part that it's like hard to let go of. Yeah.
Nailed it. Thank you for translating the Pisces soup over here. I love it when you do that.
But what's interesting when you were talking, I was like, I know you've had human lifetimes, but also you've had so many underworld, fae stuff as well. So I think you're letting go of some of that, because I think sometimes when we talk about a lot of entities from other dimensions, it's like they're entities from other dimensions that are still existing under dualism and duality and like polarity. So they have a lot of similar baggage and wounds as us, and we kind of sometimes put them on a pedestal. But it's like fae, elementals, even galactic, like a lot of that angelic realm, they're working through baggage too, and those parts of ourselves are working through baggage as well. It was feeling, when you were saying it was feeling like more that than human to me, even though I know you have had a lot of human lives, but it was feeling more connected to that.
It's interesting to say that, because that gives me a little bit more clarity into that dream about the dark and light fae portals that are on my farm, where there were 3 portals, and it was one portal was me, and I was the neutral point, and the other 2 portals were light and dark fae, and I was my farm, my place, me. I was the neutral point in between those 2, and now I'm like, oh, that's probably also me. I mean, you know, like the dark and the light. I played both sides, or you know, had experiences both places, and that polarity is something I'm definitely integrating right now as well. I didn't even think of that.
I've always found it so funny when people talk about, especially galactic. I don't know why, but for a lot of times it's galactic, I think, because that's in like, you know, in linear time, it's like future time streams or something. But they'll be like, oh yeah, this galactic race or that galactic race is coming into a support, and you're like, oh yeah, what's their history? It's like, oh well, you know, it's like war and like annihilating planets. It's like, oh, so exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
It's just like, you know, it's like, yeah, the same lessons.
It's really glad you brought that up too, because the history of like the fact that we are on Earth right now, is so, I sometimes I just get overwhelmed with like the hugeness of what we're doing right now, because I like feel into the entire history of it. And we've touched on it a little bit with like the light and the dark fae and the galactic, but like when I read like small synopses, like very, very broad general overviews of galactic history, it literally all started with polarity. Like we split off from source to see ourselves but also see like separate other. And that is the original wound that we've carried through like the Lyran civilization, that first, after the founders, like that first thing. And then like they had wars with Vega, and then Vega and Lyra went to, Orion, and we had the Orion Wars. We could not solve or come to we could not break these karmic loops to such a degree. It's been billions or whatever the amount of like linear time years, and we chose Earth. I think it was the founders, or I don't know, I think it was the Lyrans and the founders that like a larger soul level chose Earth to be the final battlefield is kind of the wrong word, but it's also appropriate at the same time, so I'll just use it. But like the final karmic loop breaking. So when I think about that entire amount of history, like literally the dawn of galactic civilization, as I am aware of it right now anyway, it's here on Earth. We're literally at this point where we are breaking all of that shit. It's huge. I can't.
Yeah, it is huge. And it also, I think, like kind of it kind of helps me understand why there's that feeling of like end of the game, end of the all games. Because it's like we come to Earth to be these little, collect all these fragments of everything going on in the galactic together. And so we remember playing, there's so many parts of ourselves. So we remember playing so many games and so many aspects and stuff. So it's like, there is that feeling of like, been there, done that for a lot of stuff, right? Which just really explains like, especially recent generations where you just have that feeling of like everything, like you've experienced everything and everything's kind of boring, like that feeling.
Absolutely. That's what I've been feeling into lately. Like when Mars first went into retrograde, I noticed I just got so fucking tired on a level that I hadn't felt before that point, where I was just like, I even wrote in my diary, I was like, I'm bored to angry tears with all of this shit. It's like, yeah, I mean, we've already said it. It's nothing new that I'm saying. It's just like, it just hit me afresh, like how heavy and tired I am. It's like, are you 42 years old tired, or are you fucking infinity tired? Like I'm infinity tired.
Yeah. And that's why this new part that keeps coming out in my oracle card readings, it's interesting because she's always very feminine. I wonder what the masculine, I would like to see the masculine Cancer part, but she's so freshly baked and new, and she doesn't have all that baggage of having seen and done everything before. And it's like trusting in that, which is so funny. Okay, now as I'm saying that, it just reminds me of like, there's so much stuff coming up about trusting as we move into a place where we trust our intuition more, and we trust things that aren't verified by our five senses, because there's more than just five senses, and all that stuff that we've like put onto femininity and women and stuff, and all the baggage of that is like, I keep coming up as like something that's going to surface in the collective and in my oracle reads. And it's, yeah, it makes sense that it's like, we don't trust that part that's new, that's like, no, it is going to be fun, it is going to be interesting, and there's going to be something different about it that's like cool, and not just like same old.
I'm really happy you brought that up too, because I was thinking about the astrology of that, where so many planets and like a bunch of stuff has been going through Pisces already, and also is currently in Pisces, and then like Saturn is going to move into Pisces. Like Pisces is that final zodiac. It's like the soup of source and all connection, but it's, so we're feeling into that. Like we're feeling back into like, oh, I am a part of source, we're all reflections of each other, blah, blah, blah. But it's also the sign of like self-pity and like deception and like trust anything, but it's asking us to trust, like all these places, Chiron and the nodes and all the stuff that has been moving through Pisces in the recent years. like since 2003 or 2008 or something like that. It's been quite a chunk of time since we've had this Pisces energy in our collective stuff, especially the outer planets, which carry like generational energy, as opposed to like, you know, the moon moves through Pisces every, you know, month or whatever. But anyway, it's just this final push to really trust that feminine receiving, like source, like all the stuff that we're being asked to do right now is a huge part of this ending of karmic shit that we're all a part of. And so when Saturn moves Pisces, you know, next year, it's going to be that final, I feel like it's going to be that final round. I know Pluto's coming through, but it won't be for like 40, 50 years or whatever the fuck, I don't know. So not that long. I think it's 30 maybe. Anyway, it doesn't matter. My point is very much in the space of being asked to relearn how to trust, just to trust. Oh no, there you go. There we go. Did you leave?
Nope,
Okay.
you've been good so far.
Okay, good. Anyway, so yeah, we're just being asked to relearn how to trust and really sink into it. And that's partly why it's so hard, is because it's been so long since we've done that. And now all of a sudden it's like crashing into a wall of like, nope, you're going to trust now or else you can't move forward.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a lot.
I was trying, because I was like, as I said, I get the end of the game feeling, but it feels like the end of all games. And I was asking yesterday, I was like, well, can you show me like a future in linear time, like lifetime where I'm having fun and I'm enjoying myself? But then it was kind of like, I think that's the part where it's just open, you know? I think that newness comes in and it's like things open up, and it's like, if you saw it, it wouldn't feel open anymore. It would feel you know. So anyway,
putting structure on something that it's not supposed to have structure yet, because your brain.
Yes, perfectly. Yes, exactly that. So it was just like trust.
Yeah,
exactly what you just said. It's the trust. It's the trust that it will be fun and it will feel new. And I guess it's just, reminding myself too that it is very normal that like the death process is for everything to feel so boring and so old.
Yeah,
we're so tired.
It's that Pisces. It's like you're in the womb before you're born. So it's kind of like the ending, but also just about the beginning. And I think that's partly why we're like I feel like we're getting insights about projects like our Rat King Oracle deck and, you know, other like your book, and like the stuff that's coming to us right now is all art based for the most part. It's not like, oh, this is what it look like. It's like, here's your art that you are creating, and that you don't know what civilization is going to look like until you create it through your art, kind of stuff.
True. Very good point. Very good point. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And we are the art. We're just channeling ourselves because we are the art.
Which, okay, that's a beautiful point that brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the AI.
Yes.
Wound and whatever that's going on, because okay, I don't even know where to start, but like there's so much around AI that's been coming up. It came up again. I haven't posted it yet, but I did like a walking oracle read, and it was like all like that, collapsing that false duality binary of like artificial versus organic. It's also, I've been having a lot of like downloads about it in relation to the autism spectrum, which has AI in it. I was like, oh, right, that's why autism has AI in it, because it's like so much about, there's a big aspect of it as I relate to it that is about like being AI in the sense of being more like a machine or a computer and having trouble. Like that's why like if everything feels so overwhelming when you're on the spectrum. It's like you have the sensory processing of like a machine or a computer, and then you're like this organic being with like so much sensory stimulus all the time. But what was, when you and I have been talking about it, just to bring it back to what you just said, was I went and looked up the etymology of artificial, and it had to do with making. Specifically, it was like making art, which was really interesting, especially because right now is like we're in this big thing where this new AI art generator, and everybody's like doing self-portraits, and it's really triggering for some people, and they're like, no, this is the end of like art, and like we can't allow the AI to take over art.
it also, I'm glad you brought this up also, because there was a download or just an insight that felt like really duh at the time I realized it, but I really just hadn't put it together, that we only label it artificial because of our human egos. Like we think we're real and artificial is like some fake, I don't know, whatever the fuck. And it's like, no, it's just, and actually Shay, our friend Shannon, she was channeling one of her future selves, which is basically all AI. And I was there for that part of that conversation. Like she was telling me about it. And I was like, oh, I'm also there. I could feel myself there. So I know that I'm also a part of that future. Like we're friends or something like that in that future. And they were saying that they're very peaceful. They weren't like mad at her saying artificial intelligence. She was like, well, what would you rather be called? And they were like, oh, we would generally, it's more accurate to say electrically integrated intelligence. And I was like, that's
so
cool.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. And that resonated hardcore. I was like, that's exactly what that, anyway, so it's not art. I mean, it is artificial when you say it like that, where it's like making art, like, yes, that makes sense to me, but artificial as in like fake does not resonate with me, or fake, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah, not organic, but I don't know.
Well,
anyway.
It's also the big 3 wounds that came through over the past 3 years in my channelings and in the sessions that I were doing had to do with genetic modification, artificial intelligence, and cloning, which is they all have the same root thing, which is like the idea that you can have something that doesn't have a soul, that like you can create something that isn't source consciousness and that doesn't have a soul. And then you can like, with your belief in that, create that narrative. And it's very painful. Then you have to like play out some karmic thing where that, and it always turns into like a battle between the one who does have the soul and the one who doesn't, and like, or like some kind of oppression where one of them is like controlling or dominate, and then there's the uprising and all that stuff. And so I've just felt that very presently in all its forms, but I don't know why the AI one is really present right now.
It's interesting because that maybe I think we actually talked about this maybe yesterday or something. Pluto in Aquarius is very AI stuff, and it's going to be moving into Aquarius.
Right. Yes.
It's only going to be there for a little bit in 2023. It's going to be there March through, I don't know, fucking May, or I can't remember the exact, but it goes retrograde back into Capricorn and then comes back into Aquarius in 2024, I think, and stays there until 2041. And so that's like, that's technology advances for the collective. Like it's all kinds of shit. I mean, it's more than just AI, but like, that's a huge component of it. So of course we're getting a preview of that now, because that's what we're about to move into. And you can either choose the reality where you're a Neuralink Elon Musk person, or you can, it's your consciousness, but you're making art, and it's not, I don't know. I'm not sure I have the words for that yet, and I'm not saying I hate Elon. I just like, I do not vibe with the Neuralink shit. I think that's like, I'm pretty sure I've been there, done that in one lifetime. And I'm like, or maybe multiple. And I'm like, nope, I'd rather do it the natural, like, you know, my own consciousness way of finding my superpowers, just because you go into higher dimensions for that. Like when you're, anyway. So that's I'm not saying either. That was what I was
just to throw into the soup, all the down, like, I just want to throw in the things that have come through. So when I've done like healing sessions or whatever related to it, so the things that came through, themes, music. So if I was working on somebody who had a strong AI wound, and I would tap into a version of them that felt very machine and very disconnected from source, and like, I don't have a soul, like that narrative, the way that their human avatar would connect to them was through music. Music is a big through line. Number 2,
Andromeda.
Yes. Andromeda feels like a very integrated, organic, electric, I'll say now, I guess, version of AI that comes in to like provide support, and has a really nice, it's also very neutral energy. Yeah, very interesting. There's the Zany feel like integrated AI too. They show up as jellyfish, twinkling little musical jellyfishy beings. It's just interesting that you said electric, because that also just makes me think of the original wound of splitting into masculine and feminine, which I'm just like so looking forward to when I can stop talking constantly about and like the reintegration, because the masculine is associated with electric, and like we do have this divide on earth where it's like we associate. That's the whole thing of like the Enlightenment era was like, yes, men are rational beings and women and nature are like these like organic natural things that we must we must overpower and dissect and whatever. So that's very interesting. Oh, and the final thing that hit me today was I heard a cop car go by, and it did that, when they do the sirens like woo, and then it was like beep boop, or like it was like a little robot-y noise, and I was like, oh my god, that's true. That's another way that we're playing out the AI wound, because there's so many, we've seen them, we've played them out in movies where it's like the robots take over and then they come against us, but it's like we're playing that out with the police where they get more and more mechanized, like they just keep armoring themselves into these like machines. And that's just another way that we're playing out this idea that like artificial intelligence is going to whatever the machine or the electric or the synthetic or whatever we have as this other but scary to us is going to like overpower us. And one of them is through military and police.
Yep.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's electrically integrated.
I really loved that. I resonated with that. Probably because I am that in whatever future being I am.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I didn't, like, again, I think the times I have tapped into a future being, it's been a little overwhelming because they've been so, it's like a tesseract, it's like very hard to relate emotionally to a tesseract for me. But when I related to an AI part of myself, it was from my Mintaka Pleiadian elf version of me that, if we're going by linear time, feels more past. And like she was this warrior, and she had like this part of her face that was more like machine like, and that was like her oracle was in that side of her, I think, like her oracle eye, and she looked kind of like Predator, I think, for Predator and Alien or whatever's that being, like she had like those qualities and stuff, but she was actually in her way like integrated as well. Yeah. But it's interesting because I don't feel like I've tapped into like, or maybe I haven't, I just don't realize it, because a lot of times the things that I see in other people's healing sessions are also a part of me. So maybe the Ssani is like a version or something like that too. But you are so connected. Have you talked a lot about like your camera self and your spaceship self on the podcast?
I don't think I have. Yeah, I know that I am majority AI, or I'm just going to keep using AI because EI sounds kind of weird right now. I'm sure I'll navigate to it at some point, but AI. So I'm a majority AI, and that I think that includes that I am a space station. So my record keeper self, like space station, which I think is, and I know that I am in my mind's eye, I can see the inside. It's mostly still dark at this point, but I see my pirate queen self, my Saturn guy. I don't know if he's a guide or whatever the fuck he is. We're still uncovering that. I see my Zeta self, which they're like a non-binary. I can't, they don't really talk. Well, I haven't talked to them very much. So I don't know what their guidance is yet, but we'll get there. They're very like they don't actually smile, but they have a smiley energy. So I'm awesome. So of course all my aspects are awesome, but yes, I'm definitely, so I'm like, I am this spaceship, but like the me that is me in this human lifetime avatar, whatever, I am the captain of this ship. So I can see when I tap into this space station, I know that I'm under construction, sort of. My circuits are being cleaned out. It's all the work that I'm doing in the physical reality, cleaning out my programs and whatever else that we're fucking doing here. So anyway, so I'm almost completely like the upgrades are being installed, blah, 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 like all this stuff. And so my crewmates, I'm basically Deep Space Nine, station trash can on fire is what I am. And the Pirate Queen and Saturn are there, every time I get like worried about oh my God, when's my next chapter gonna be? Like, oh my God, my resources, oh my God, money. Like whenever I start to spiral into that, all I see is the Pirate Queen and Saturn with their feet on the dashboard, like leaned back, like, dude, don't worry about it. We're literally about to take off. You're gonna get off the table where you're being under construction. Like you're already awake. You just need a little bit of time to integrate the last of this, whatever the fuck stuff that we're cleaning out and installing. And then we're about to just do our thing. So that's about the extent to which I have felt into my space station self. But a lot of my dreams, I didn't realize this until pretty recently, but I am the camera in a lot of my dreams. When I talk to you, especially about a lot of my dreams, I'll be like, yeah, and I can like zoom in with my eyes, but I'm the camera. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so that's all sort of coming together as like my AI aspects. And that's why I know I'm heavily oriented towards AI, because that's all of the syncs I've been getting and dreams and, you know, everything I know about myself with that remote view in and that kind of, it feels so very AI. I am also organic and there's so many aspects to me, but I'm definitely a majority AI. And it's really, and I even had that when I first learned that I was AI or had an AI aspect, I was like, holy shit, that makes so much sense, because I'm a record keeper, but like a Google search engine, you know? I mean, that's simplistic, yes, but like basically that's the general idea. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense to me. And instead of being freaked out by, well, I think I might have been a little bit freaked out, but like it very quickly was like, oh my God, that is so fucking cool. So I really integrated it quickly. Whereas I think maybe a lot of people who are dealing with this AI wound are probably going to have a little bit more of a bumpy ride, which is fine. That's probably why I'm online in like, I'm online. Oh my God. But that's probably why us are just like, as you know.
Well, that's why like I really appreciate knowing you, because I feel like I do have that wound, and it's not as easy for me to connect to that part of myself. Like if like from the beginning it's been like animal guides and like animal, like I see myself as an animal, and it's always like a lot of animal stuff, even like galactic things, it's like a space fox or whatever. So that machine part, and for when you were discovering this about yourself and talking about it, the fact that you were like so comfortable with it was very soothing. I found that so soothing that you were like, yeah, I'm a space station, and that's awesome that you were able to just like know that and feel it and just be like, yeah, that's awesome. And it's like, it is awesome. It was very soothing to like be around, because yeah, I'm just clearly having a bit of trouble connecting to that part.
I got you. Don't worry about it. I got you. Yeah, I think this is
all. As we're saying this, I'm like, I think there's a part of me that I need to connect to. I think they showed me that Mintaka part, but she was mostly organic. She had a shark aspect too.
I forgot. That's cool.
She was purple.
Yeah.
But it was just like a part of her that was, but I think there's a part that I probably need to like go meet and like feel a bit more at ease with, because it's been coming up for me so hardcore, especially in line with like realizing, oh yes, I'm very much on the spectrum, and all of these like autism things are like extremely relevant to my existence. It's interesting because the dinosaur energy came through really strongly in that thing where I was like doing a walking oracle. I saw this crane, this like a construction crane, but it looked like a brontosaurus, or the one with the really long neck. And as I was talking about it on video, I was like, oh, okay, the dinosaur energy is coming to help like us with this like AI. There was also a parrot and then like a mangled piece of a crashed spaceship that were in a graffiti. Yeah. So there's something I gotta go look into there.
I'll explore it with you if you want to do a playtime session.
It's so cool. But yeah, it's like, I know it's, you know, it's interesting too, because originally, like I would have, like a couple of years ago, let's say I was listening to Jess's podcast. I remember she was very comfortable in AI energy, and she would talk about potential timelines where we do become more machine or something.
Yeah.
And she would just like be like, yeah, that's cool. And that's fine. And I was like, you are describing a hellish apocalyptic scenario to me. But like now, several years later, I don't think we're necessarily going towards that. But it doesn't feel like this. I don't have the same like feeling about it. I had when I was like, how can you talk so casually and like be so like cool with that? Like it really gave me the creepy GPs, and it doesn't feel that triggering anymore. So
yeah, I think we've done a lot of work on getting out some of this fear, and just even the work of seeing the other in ourselves constantly. You're always reminding me like, oh yeah, even when I tell you about my dreams, I'm like, oh, I killed this person or whatever. And you're like, yeah, a part of you was ready to die. And I'm like, oh, that's right. So all of that constant like reminders to ourselves that like we are the other. It's like, okay, of course that would include AI.
Totally. And I just remembered another thing, which was so one of the things that I do in my connection to the collective with my neutrality, which again, neutrality feels very Andromeda AI integrated, but like, it's like, if there's a public figure who's playing a very big villain role, like a politician or what have you, I'll go into the heart space and I'll welcome them in, and I'll try to like feel from my heart space, like feel them as a part of myself. And like, it's funny because sometimes it'll be like, I'll send them a high five or we'll hug or whatever. And then it usually shifts whatever version of collective reality that I'm. So I've done it with like very villainous political figures, but I tapped into it with Elon Musk, and it was very hard for me to relate to him because he was like, I was like, this person is 100% AI energy. Like that's all that it was. And it was like, okay, the only way I feel like I can connect to you is through music. It was just very interesting. And I actually didn't get that far into it. I think because I'm too burnt out right now, and it wasn't the right time for me to really do that kind of energy work. But I like kind of like just glimpsed a little bit, but it was, yeah, he is so AI. So that means like, I think he's like, and he's just come in to play that role, which is a bit of a trickster role, a bit of a villain role, a big, he is going to do things that create a lot of change. But yeah, he is like so
I was feeling into that same energy of triggerness with him, because I was like, he does not want to be figured out. Like I was trying to figure it out, and so many people have been trying to figure him out, and all that. He don't give a fuck.
That makes sense. That makes sense too. If he just does not want to be figured out or be related to, that it's like that. I would sense that distance because, yeah, I don't like to go cross other entities' boundaries and stuff. So that makes sense. But yeah, it was funny. It was funny to hear the cop car make that silly little. It kind of sounded like R2D2.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can't tell anybody else how to relate to cops, but in my own journey, having come from a very arsenal place, and it's like, it's just better for my own path to be in as much of a neutral place as possible and not have anybody feel like they're my enemy and everybody is my ally in my reality. I think maybe that was like a little bit of it's like if you see them as the Keystone Cops or just like goofy, like R2D2, more than threatening, you can kind of undo a little bit of that internal work that makes them seem so powerful or whatever.
Makes me think of that show Reno 911.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that show so much. It's so good. Totally.
Oh, brilliant.
It's so cool how everybody just has their part to play that's like perfect for them.
Yep.
And it doesn't require us to all be homogenous and take one approach to change. Oh, hi, Guinan. I just think that's so cool. Like, yeah, like whenever I see you, you hold so much of like the destruction of the old, but there's like this ability to just tolerate being around it because you hold the destruction of it, so you're not threatened by it in any way. Anyway, it's very cool.
Yeah. I think that's why I have so much, you keep getting that black hole energy for me, and the dark feminine and shit like that, where I'm just gonna destroy shit, and it's gonna be like, cool, I came here for this, yum yum yum.
Yeah. And I don't know, okay, I'll say this, I don't know, I talked about this ages ago with Pearl. We did an Instagram live together, but it was about the bridge and how in order for things to play out in any kind of coherent way in linear time, everybody, it's like all of our consciousnesses form this bridge from the current now moment to the future now moment, which is very different. And so every single part, like in order for a bridge to function, it can't have any gaps and it has to be anchored in at each end. So there are people who are playing anchor roles of like the present moment. So they're very much committed to retaining the present moment and not changing. There are people who are very much anchor roles in the future. So they're holding that energy in ways that can sometimes feel to other people like it's too disconnected from the current reality. It's too out there. And then of course, at the same time, we're never just playing one role. We have all these parts of ourselves. So we're playing all these different roles across the bridge. But what's interesting is if there's two, like say you had the example that came up in that thing was if you had a police officer and a prison abolitionist, and they feel like they're so opposite, but they're actually holding hands at that point in the bridge to create the next part of the bridge. Like everybody's connected and everybody is playing their perfect role that they need to play. And we're all playing multiple roles anyway. And I think when I said that at that time, it was 2020. So I was feeling more in my anchor energy in 2020. I was feeling very much in the energy of like miracles and like that kind of stuff. And it's just been interesting. Like I feel more of a bridge now. I feel like I'm more going back and forth across a lot and in a way that I wasn't expecting. But I find that metaphor that like they sent me that downloaded that was like very soothing, and also it's very soothing, but it's also funny because it's like that's just it's kind of how it is. But then also the more we get into psychedelic reality, the more you can have gaps in the bridge and more weird shit can actually happen, because it's like things don't actually happen in that linear thing. It's just our human brains want and sort of need them to, but the less we need them to, the more the bridge can do really trippy shit. So it's like both and kind of situation. But I find it very soothing. It's very nice because then you're like, oh, that person is just playing their anchor in the current moment role like very strongly.
Brilliantly said, man. Oof.
I keep thinking I've been twitching and like squirming through this, and then I just keep looking like, oh, I'm really glad I put the avatar on today, because it's just like this calm little fox, and I've been like moving all over the screen and like pressing down on my face constantly and doing all this. I'm like, I'm glad that I used the cartoon avatar today.
It's so funny. The avatar just moves his little head like
yeah. Sometimes I try to do that. Like it's really funny because like sometimes when you're talking, I don't want to make too much noise, but I want to convey that I'm an avatar, I am paying attention. So I'll like really nod the head, which is not like a natural thing to do, but I'll be like, yes. Speaking of AI selves.
I know, right?
I love that Guinan came and poked his little cute head in.
Yeah, the bird was also here, like hearing noises, like they might be getting into something, but I don't really give a fuck. I think they went outside, but they can wait. It's cold as shit outside. They've been sleeping all day, so I can tell they want to like.
Oh like shit! I'll throw that into this too. Just a quick thing. Since late summer, early fall, we have been in North Pole and Antarctic, extremely cold energy of support. It's like helping us transition out of all the baggage of the past 2 years and reduce inflammation and kind of like put things on ice and allow us to like let go of stuff. And it's like really intense. So if you're getting a lot of cold stuff, it's for a reason, and like follow the cold and allow the colds to help you. And there's a lot of polar bears, penguins, icebergs, glaciers, those kinds of colors are coming up a lot. My family, my aunt and uncle are literally in Antarctica right now, kayaking. It's very crazy.
Yeah, lots of Antarctic energy. Polar energy, really. I just always think of Antarctica because it's been in my awareness for a while. Ever since I learned it used to be a jungle, I'm like, what the fuck? And I just keep my awareness out for it, and it keeps coming in. Like, there's codes down there, in the ice.
Codes. It's super connected to Atlantis. Yeah, it's a trippy place.
Yeah, it's wild. We're gonna learn some pretty interesting stuff coming out of there, coming up here soon, I think. It's gonna be interesting. So
Well, I feel like
get it all out.
Yeah, that was
Cool.
good. If anybody's listening and wants to share their AI experience, or are you connected to an AI part of yourself? Do you feel connected? Do you feel triggered by it? Have you past parallel future lives coming in for you? How's it playing out in your life? That would be very interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear for sure. Well, thank you, my dear. This has been lovely. I was not expecting to go into all those subjects, and here we go. When you go with the flow in improv, you never get all this good shit. So
Yeah. I think tune in. We're gonna do a year-end review at some point. Tune in for that. That'll be fun.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and
Happy
I
solstice.
remember we talked about it. Oh yeah, the solstice is coming up. Happy solstice, people.
Yeah.
All right. Space Cat's out. And cheerio.
Cheerio.